Matt takes a step forward, like, what am I going to do? Should I do something? Takes a step back, and then he goes past this sergeant. He goes up to Mr. Brooks. He doesn't grab him by the neck. He doesn't grab him by the skin. He takes his shirt and he moves him up on the gurney. That's what he does. He moves him up on the gurney. And just as he finishes doing that, Officer Farina kicks Mr. Brooks between the legs. It appears he's either trying to hurt him or he's trying to push his body up further on the gurney. Whatever he does, it's wrong. Mr. Gallagher now just has the shirt. He's not touching any other part of Mr. Brooks. He lets go, and then an officer comes around in front of him and blocks him out. His sergeant's behind him, and Mr. Brooks' legs are kicking. They're kicking. He can't kick people.
Hello, critical thinkers. Hope all is well. Please like the video, share the video, comment below on the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please also click on the bell notification icon and select all so that you will be notified when I go live.
How Marcy is so terrible, which would have something to do with the case if Robert ever set foot in Marcy, which he didn't. He only made it to the emergency room. You will witness on tape this depravity firsthand. It will be gut-wrenching. It will be almost beyond belief that these three men, sworn to protect Robert Brooks and do their duty, treated him with such depravity. So let's review what happened, what the evidence will show. On the morning of December the 9th, 2024, Robert Brooks was an inmate at the Mohawk Correctional Facility. He had been assaulted by other inmates on two occasions, December the 7th and December the 9th. Why? Not going to be able to prove that to you, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We're going to put in evidence regarding those assaults simply to show you that they had nothing to do with his death. Rather than deal with whatever was percolating at Mohawk regarding Robert, the officials decided to transfer him to the Marcy Correctional Facility. You'll see a video of Robert that morning while he's at Mohawk. And I want you to pay careful attention to that video because he's going to be being interviewed by a corrections officer, Sergeant David Sayu. I stand here not to tell you with a broad brush that corrections officers are bad people. On the contrary, the overwhelming majority of them are decent people that do a difficult job, and we owe them our gratitude and our thanks. David Sayo is such a man. Contrary to these three defendants, you will see a correction officer doing his duty, treating Robert like a human being, which shouldn't be that hard to grasp. Sayu generally wants to find out what has happened to Robert at Mohawk. It's obvious to him that Robert is having issues, but you'll see with your own eyes, you'll see Robert being compliant, being decent, being respectful. In fact, it gets to a point where Sayu feels comfortable enough with him to remove his handcuffs. Again, our medical proof will show that the assaults that took place at Mohawk had nothing to do with Robert's death. Robert was 5'11". He was a massive behemoth of exactly 148 pounds. In his near decade in state prison, he had a whopping 1 write-up for misconduct. When he left Mohawk that night, everything he had in the world other than his 2 sons was in a couple of duffel bags that he was carrying when he got on that bus. Robert arrives at Marcy Correctional Facility at about 9:07 p.m. 9:07 p.m. And a half hour later, he's dead. He's laying helpless in the emergency room at Marcy Correctional Facility on a gurney. He's got injuries to his head. his neck, his testicles, his liver, his spleen. You'll see a tape of Robert from that evening, and he's looking into a camera that he doesn't know was on and none of these defendants knew was on, and he's pleading for his life. He's begging, someone tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me? And he's also choking and drowning on his own blood. And these three defendants, each in their own way, the proof will show, were intimately involved with these acts. They no longer were corrections officers. They were a gang. They took turns, collectively and individually, of punching him, kneeing him, pepper spraying him, choking him, pinning him down, cuffing his legs. The last thing he had to defend himself, his legs. And Mr. Gallagher, you will see, decided to cuff his legs during the beating. Having done this work for some time, let me suggest that what's in your mind right now is, surely, Mr. Fitzpatrick, there's more to this. You're leaving something out. He must have spit at the officers. He must have degraded them in some way, insulted their manhood. The truth, the sickening, gut-wrenching truth that you're about to experience is that he didn't do a damn thing. Absolutely no. He was greeted by these three men and others. David Kingsley and Nicholas Keefe were part of the welcoming committee, along with Glenn Trombley and Robert Kessler, the latter two who you will hear from during this trial, and they were soon to be joined by Matthew Gallagher. Trombley and Kessler will be witnesses. They made deals with the prosecution. Had they not made deals with the prosecution, you would never know about the two assaults that occurred to Robert before he was on camera. You can choose to disbelieve them or not, or believe them. That will be up to you. They are two men that will tell you under oath that they will regret for the rest of their lives the cowardly failure to act that they participated in during the beating of Robert. Someone long ago said, an event has happened upon which it is difficult to speak, but impossible to remain silent. Impossible to remain silent. The words of Edmund Burke from 200 years ago. Even today, they explain the decisions of Trombley and Kessler to testify, reluctant as they may be, ashamed as they may be, and credible as they may be, to speak about something which is impossible to ignore and impossible to remain silent. Defendant Nicholas Kiefer here, he shows up on the scene, part of the welcoming committee. He heroically pepper sprayed Robert for no reason at all. And you'll watch him throughout the rest of these proceedings. He doesn't participate in the beating in the ER. It doesn't matter. He was part of that gang that assaulted Robert. He disoriented him, made him helpless, and allowed the beating to continue to intensify and result in Robert's death. And ladies and gentlemen, he's no Uber driver in this play. Robert is passed off to other members of the gang. You'll see a lot of them that are not in this courtroom for reasons that do not concern you. And then you will see a sickening video of Robert being hogtied and transported into the infirmary like a dead animal. Not because the defendants wanted to get him help or aid, but because that's where they had to take him, the first stop. With utter indifference and depravity, Robert is hogtied and dragged into that ER. Among the individuals doing that is this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Now inside the infirmary, Robert is laid out on a gurney. You'll see video of that. He's already dazed, he's confused. He's clearly been beaten severely before the cameras ever capture his image in that ER. Mr. Kiefer has done his part with his blows, and now a fresh set of corrections officers take over. And remember, they killed him, that gang. You'll see pictures of Mr. Farina and this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Kingsley with his arms and his hands around Robert's neck, treating him like a doll, while Mr. Farina tries to shove a rag down his throat. He's gagged, he's choked, he's punched, he's yanked by the neck, he's dragged off a gurney by Mr. Kingsley and one of his accomplices by the neck and taken over in the corner for God only knows what purpose. He has no means to defend himself because his hands are cuffed behind his back during this whole process. So what does Mr. Gallagher do? Does he return to the human race and say, enough, stop this now? No, he goes out to his car to get some leg irons. And now we're going to argue to you that he was just following orders to leg iron a man that is moments away from death. Shockingly, after Mr. Gallagher retrieves the leg irons, when you see his body-worn camera, he zips up his jacket. So for 9.5 minutes, we see the inside of Mr. Gallagher's jacket instead of seeing what he was doing. Now, why do you think that happened? You'll know by the time this proof is concluded. Contrary to human experience, apparently it got colder inside and he had to zip up his jacket. Mr. Gallagher had a free will. He had human intelligence. He had training. He saw a man being beaten. He had no obligation, no duty, and God help us all, no human decency to put leg irons on that man. He participated in that death. He aided everyone that was there, and that's what the evidence will show and proved. An ambulance wasn't called for Robert until 9:40 p.m. They rush him to Wynn Hospital. He has no chance. Despite Herculean efforts, he is pronounced dead. Now, many months later, we appear in this courtroom because an indictment has been returned against these three men and others. Mr. Kiefer is charged with offering a false instrument for filing in the first degree. I'm going to make reference to the indictment in reverse order of severity. That's a very fancy way of saying he was required by law to fill out a document, and the man that is going to sit there during this trial, Mr. Kiefer, and say, I didn't break any law. I'm not guilty. I'm presumed innocent. He bald-faced lied in his report. Here's what he said. Prior to entering the emergency room of the infirmary, all force ceased being used against Robert Brooks. That's his story then. You'll see him walking around, looking in, participating, chuckling, hanging with his fellow gang members, while this poor 43-year-old, 148-pound guy is being pummeled like a rag doll a few feet away from him. I will ask you to convict Mr. Kiefer of that count. The defendants, Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer, are charged with gang assault in the second degree. I must and I will prove to you that they had intent to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks. Good Lord, did they intend a physical injury? You won't have any doubt of that whatsoever. They were aided by multiple people. They caused serious physical injury to him. Good Lord, they caused his death. And I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty against Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer for gang assault. The second count charges these three defendants with manslaughter in the first degree, intending to cause injury to the defendant, Robert Brooks, serious physical injury, and acting in concert with each other. Sounds complicated at first, but when you boil it down, it's pretty simple. You're going to see massive evidence that this gang, this whole group of these people that stopped being corrections officers the moment Robert got off that bus, that their motive, their operandi was to cause serious physical injury to this man, and they wound up causing his death. And the final count, the most serious count, depraved indifference to human life. Depraved indifference to human life. Nicholas Anzalone, David Kingsley, Anthony Farina, Christopher Walworth, Matthew Gallagher, Nicholas Kiefer, three of them on trial here today. You won't have any doubt whatsoever that their conduct evinced a depraved indifference to human life. When you watch this video, the first words that pop into your mind are going to be depravity, indifference, recklessness. Difficult to watch, but I'm counting on you to do that. Christopher Walworth, Nicholas Anzalone, Nicholas Kiefer, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Brooks was at various times restrained. He was beaten. He was choked. He was strangled. He was gagged. He was forcibly moved and kicked, all with minimal or no resistance on his part and with absolutely zero legitimate law enforcement purpose. These assaults were perpetrated while the defendants were acting in concert with each other. With depraved indifference, they did nothing to restrain each other, did nothing to stop the beatings, and failed to immediately order medical assistance. The indictment alleges, and the medical examiner will so testify, that Mr. Brooks suffered injuries to his head, to his neck, severe injuries to his neck, his hyoid bone, his thyroid cartilage, his torso, his liver, his spleen, his testicles, each and every blow contributing to his death as it put added strain on his heart, as his body gasped and choked for blood because he couldn't breathe because of the blood rushing into his airways. Blood as a result of the beatings these three defendants and their fellow gang members inflicted upon him. If I'm able to get it into evidence, and I trust that, I hope I will, you will see Department of Corrections and Community Supervision's rules and guidelines regarding an individual officer's duty to intervene. Duty to intervene. It is not complicated. When you see what you will see with your own eyes, and you realize that these three men did nothing to intervene, I ask you, just please follow your oaths. Follow your oaths and follow the facts in this case. I will show you all three of these defendants have signed acknowledgments within a year of this homicide, that they all acknowledged being trained in that area and understood what their duties were. And they don't get to change that because it's October of 2025. You'll see the signed form by David Kingsley. You'll see a signed form by Matthew Gallagher. You'll see a signed form by Nicholas Kiefer. You're not supposed to help and stand by while others beat an inmate to death. It really ain't that complicated. You'll see, as I already alluded to, Mr. Kiefer's use of force report, which is a total fabrication. It's complete nonsense. You'll see a use of force memo by Mr. Kingsley. Again, glaring by its omissions. If you read the use of force memo, you'd think that Robert tripped on a piece of ice on his way into the infirmary. Now, how can I tell you with such certainty that I will prove all of these things to you? Because my most important witness in this case, ladies and gentlemen, there's 4 of them. They're body-worn cameras, about the size, a little bigger than a pack of cigarettes. All 3 of these defendants are supposed to wear them and supposed to activate them every time there's an encounter. Not only did they not activate them, Mr. Gallagher went so far as to cover his up as he zipped up his jacket. You know how many of these defendants activated their cameras? 0. Not one. 9:26, when Mr. Brooks is a danger to absolutely no one, Mr. Gallagher, at Sergeant Trombley's direction, goes out to retrieve leg irons. And then at exactly 9:26 and 33 seconds, he zips up his jacket. The evidence is going to show that the rest of these defendants were unaware that video was being made. Can you imagine what this trial would be like if I didn't have those videos? Can you imagine what their stories would be? We already know what Mr. Kiefer's story is. Nothing happened after he entered the emergency room. You'll see that that's completely fallacious. If I didn't have these tapes, I'd be listening to stories about, oh, it was icy out. He was resisting arrest. We bravely had to defend ourselves. And we were barely able to restrain him because he was in a psychotic rage from some drug. But they didn't know that each of these 4 body-worn cameras from 4 separate corrections officers were storing data that the New York State Police were able to recover. And you'll hear about that, and you'll see these tapes in all their depravity. I won't have to say much as I show those videos to you. I won't have to. Because if you're the people I think you are, you'll know exactly what happened. There's no audio, and you will have ample time during the course of this trial to familiarize yourself exactly who is who on that tape. You won't get it the first time, trust me. It's difficult sometimes. You'll be able to tell Robert Brooks because he's the one bleeding and dying. You'll see a composite of all of those tapes together. And then when I finish presenting that tape to you, remind yourself that these 3 defendants are sitting here telling you, we broke no laws. You know, I go to Disney World a lot. My favorite ride is Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm not ashamed to admit that, but as you walk in, if any of you have ever been there, there's this baritone voice that says, dead men tell no tales. That's not true. It's Robert Brooks in death is going to tell you what caused his death. We're going to present to you Dr. Katya Merkalova, and she is going to describe to you in excruciating detail the injuries that Robert suffered, the number of injuries that he suffered, the lethality of the force used, how each one of these blows, as I mentioned earlier, put strain on his failing heart. She'll tell you that Robert had a synthetic drug in his system, and she will very, very clearly tell you how that had absolutely nothing to do with his death or with his conduct. In fact, the only thing it had to do with it is probably ameliorated some of the pain that he was suffering. These defendants took Robert's life, these 3 and others, with such callousness and such brutality that it will probably take her close to an hour just to describe to you each and every wound that he suffered. Wounds to the right side of his head, his neck, his torso, his groin, all while these defendants were smiling, joking, checking the time, pepper spraying him, cuffing his legs, telling the nurses, don't come in the room, nothing to see here, until it was way too late to save Robert. For the depravity, the indifference, the gross recklessness, the utter lack of urgency, you can look at a room full of people that look like they have about as much care as they do as to whether or not it's going to rain a month from now. They're just going about what they do. And I'll ask you to convict Mr. Kingsley because of the gross abuse that he, and you will see it, inflicted on Robert's neck, the beatings that he participated in. I'll ask you to convict Mr. Gallagher, who made it easier for these people to inflict this pain, who tried to prevent you from seeing what he was doing, who restrained this guy's legs, and he's going to tell you that it was part of his training? Wait till you see Robert lying on that gurney, and you tell me what world an individual lives in to say that's part of my training. And Nicholas Kiefer, the brave pepper sprayer, who had no idea what was going on, just rushed into a scene and joined in the beating. They murdered Robert. They murdered him with a depraved indifference to human life. I wish each and every one of you Godspeed over the next couple of days. And I can't imagine a better place for justice to be than this courtroom with you good people. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. B. Bush, make an opening statement on behalf of Mr. Kingsley.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Council, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Once again, I'm Luke Mebush, representing David Kingsley, a husband, father of 3, correctional officer for over 9 years. This case comes down to David Kingsley's thoughts and intentions. David's intent, his mindset during the events of December 9th, 2024. The district attorney has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted in a manner that can be considered depraved, and that he did so with complete indifference and devoid or regard for human life. Murder in the second degree. In the alternative, the district attorney has to prove David intended and wanted to cause serious physical injury to Mr. Brooks and caused his death, constituting manslaughter in the first degree. Before we talk about this specific case, let's take a moment to understand the world we are talking about. Correctional officers work in one of the most dangerous environments in our society. Every day, they step into a prison which runs rampant with drugs. They deal with men who are under the influence, who are often violent, unpredictable, and often intent on harming staff, other incarcerated individuals, or even themselves. Fights break out with little warning. Weapons are made from almost anything. Tension runs high, and officers are expected to act immediately when something happens. These are daily occurrences, and they don't get to pause, review video, or reflect. They are trained to respond quickly to control situations before they spread. Maintaining control and order in the facility is critical to the safety of the Department of Corrections personnel and the incarcerated individuals. That is the backdrop here. The law requires you to evaluate what happened in the context of that environment. Similar to doctors and nurses in emergency rooms or firefighters and their commanders on scene, they have to act with urgency, trusting the people behind them. You will hear that Robert Brooks was involved in fights with other incarcerated individuals at Mohawk Correctional Facility on December 7th and again on December 9th, 2024. It was at this time that Mr. Brooks sustained significant injuries, which led to the decision to separate the parties and transferred Mr. Brooks to Marcy Correctional Facility. When Mr. Brooks left Mohawk and the van pulled into Marcy, from the very beginning, he resisted instructions. He told officers what he wouldn't and wouldn't do. He ignored them and was not following lawful orders. Orders that may seem menial to you, somebody living outside those walls, but important in maintaining safety and control. That passive resistance continued through the administration building and into the vestibule area. After his leg shackles were removed, you will hear that there was an issue, and the officers brought Mr. Brooks outside where he was pepper sprayed. One officer on scene then pulled their pin, a red dot. An emergency was called, a signal that requires immediate backup because an officer may be in distress. A call where all officers who are available must respond. The officers that day responded because they are trained and ordered to do so. When a red dot is called, the responding officers have no idea what lies ahead of them or what they are getting themselves into. Even when a red dot is called off, those responding officers will always continue to the scene to make sure no further assistance is needed. And what followed was a series of chaotic events. And you will see portions of this on video. You will see officers using physical force to move and restrain Mr. Brooks. You will see strikes, attempts to get him to comply, and decisions being made in the moment, not after careful reflection. Now, the district attorney will show you those clips and say, look, that's excessive, that's depraved, that's indifferent. But your job will be to evaluate whether what you see meets the legal standard of depraved indifference or intentional infliction of serious injury. Not whether it looked rough, not whether you would have done it differently, because the lives you live are much different than the lives living behind those prison walls. And the officers live there as well. There's one particular moment you will see Officer Kingsley, my client. He is holding Mr. Brooks as other officers are around him. At times, you'll see him trying to reposition Mr. Brooks on the gurney. And it appears that his hands are near and around Mr. Brooks' neck as he lifts him up. Let's be direct about that. Officers are not trained to lift people by the neck. It was not the proper technique. And yes, on video, it looks violent. But here's what the evidence will show. It lasted only seconds. It was done in an effort to get Mr. Brooks upright in that specific moment and nothing more. It was done in an effort to get Mr. Brooks up. It was done in a chaotic scene under orders to get him up, either direct or implied, with multiple people involved, including 2 sergeants who were in charge of all the correctional officers in that room. It was not done with the intent to injure. It was not done out of indifference to life. It was rough, an imperfect decision in the middle of a confusing and stressful situation. The law requires the prosecution to prove depraved indifference or intent to injure. A moment of rough handling, especially in the context of restraint, is not depraved indifference. Now let's turn to the charges themselves. The district attorney has charged 2 different crimes based on 2 different legal theories that are contradictory to one another. First, murder in the 2nd degree. This crime requires proof of a mental state of depraved indifference, that David Kingsley acted so recklessly and showed no regard for Mr. Brooks and was indifferent to his life, that he did not care whether he lived or died. Second, manslaughter in the 1st degree. This charge requires proof that David intended to cause serious physical injury, that he set out to seriously hurt Mr. Brooks, and in doing so caused his death. These are 2 very different theories. One says the actions were reckless, the other says they were intentional. Both cannot be true. You will see as this trial unfolds that the evidence does not support either theory. What happened was messy, it was physical, but it was not indifferent to life. And it was not an intentional attempt to cause serious physical injury. You will hear about the role of Sergeant Trombley. He was the ranking officer present. He at times gave orders and at others stood there and did absolutely nothing. That matters because correctional officers like David Kingsley operate within a system of trust and reliance. When a sergeant is present and giving directions, officers comply because the sergeant is expected to have knowledge and understanding of the overall situation. The evidence will show that David Kingsley did not have knowledge of the overall situation. He did not start this incident. He wasn't there. He did not order it. He was not following along in a scene he had just arrived at after a red dot was called. Officer in need of assistance. As he was holding Mr. Brooks at times, but he never initiated any strikes. None. What's significant after all this, after the struggle, after Mr. Brooks was placed back on the gurney, another officer started to recognize that Mr. Brooks was in distress, and then something else happens. You will see David Kingsley, the first officer, to begin chest compressions. You will hear testimony about CPR being performed, about efforts to revive Mr. Brooks until an ambulance arrives. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a depraved act by somebody who is indifferent to Mr. Brooks' life. It's an officer recognizing a medical emergency and doing everything he could as they are trained to save a life. This trial will not be about whether the video is easy to watch. It won't be. It will not be about whether the officers handled everything perfectly. They didn't. It will be about whether the prosecution proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer Kingsley acted with depraved indifference to human life or with intent to cause serious physical injury. And when you look closely at the evidence, when you see the timeline, the orders, the chaos, the decisions being made in real time, you will see that burden has not been met. And at this trial, the only verdict supported by the law and the evidence should be not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. English. Mr. Bluebrand, you will speak it over on behalf of Mr. Gallo.
We change the order. Withdrawn.
Mr. Monteretto, do you wish to make an opening on behalf of Mr. Kiefer?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you very much. And please support, counsel. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is David Longaretta, and I'm here with Attorney Mark Curley, and together we represent Nicholas Kiefer in this matter. Before I start my opening remarks, we want to thank each and every one of you for your willingness to participate in this process. Quite frankly, without your willingness to participate, our entire system of justice would come to a complete standstill. So again, we thank each and every one of you. Now, Nicholas Kiefer. Nick Kiefer is a family man. He has a wife, he has 3 young children. Nick has been an officer for 10 years. Nick has been falsely accused of horrible, horrible crimes. And he has refused to plead guilty to something he did not do. Nick has demanded his right to have you, this jury, decide this case for Nicholas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, right from the outset, we ask you, keep an open mind. Remember that the indictment and the charges that Mr. Fitzpatrick had gone through in detail for you, okay, are mere allegations. They are not proof of anything. You even heard the judge say that. It's just a document. The prosecution in this matter bears the burden of proving each and every element of each and every crime to each of you beyond a reasonable doubt. You've heard a lot about beyond a reasonable doubt yesterday and today, the highest burden we have in our system of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, that is in fact the cornerstone of our system of justice. And it is your duty as jurors to hold the prosecution to this burden of proof on each and every element of each and every crime. Now, as you heard from Mr. Fitzpatrick, in this case, you're going to have the benefit of videos. And the videos will show you, black and white, what happened at relevant times. We anticipate the prosecution will be putting in these videos into evidence for your consideration. Nicholas Key plans on using these exact same videos to show you that Nicholas Kiefer is not guilty of these crimes. Now, as you see these videos, you're going to see numerous people in the videos. We ask you, when you watch these videos, and I'm presuming it may take you more than one view, when you see these videos, I ask you to pay very careful and close attention to see if you see Nicholas Kiefer in that video. Take note of Nick Kiefer's actions. Look and see if Mr. Kiefer is even there. Along with the videos, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear testimony and you're going to see a multitude of other exhibits. And as Mr. Fitzpatrick had alluded to, we anticipate that you're going to hear evidence of DOC's rules and regulations. We further anticipate, ladies and gentlemen, that you are going to hear about how these rules and regulations may have not been followed on December 9th, 2024. I ask you all, be very, very mindful. Nick is not on trial for violating any DOC's rules or regulations. Nick is on trial for very serious penal law violations. Now, as jurors, it is your prerogative. You can accept or you can reject any evidence that the court allows into evidence in your consideration. That includes testimony that may be offered to you or that is in fact offered to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the court has indicated, as Mr. Fitzpatrick has indicated, there are three gentlemen on trial here. When each and every piece of evidence is submitted to you, I ask you to ask yourselves, is this piece of evidence relevant to Nicholas Kiefer? Is it relevant to David King? Or is it relevant to Mr. Gallagher? Is it relevant to maybe one or two of them and not the third? Or is it relevant to any of them at all? That will be your determination. As you heard the prosecution in this case, ladies and gentlemen, this night of December 9th, 2024 involves three separate incidences. One in the breezeway, which is in the administration building of the Marcy Correctional Facility. One is on the walkway from leaving the administration building en route to the infirmary. And the third in the treatment room of the infirmary of the Marcy Correctional Facility. Three separate and distinct incidences. It is not one continuous incident. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on December 9th, Nick Kiefer went to work like any other day. He was mandated to work a double shift, 16 hours, as they often are in the Department of Corrections. Nick was due to return to his family later that night at 11 p.m. At approximately 9 p.m. on that day, Nick received a radio transmission saying, "We have an in-draft," which means we have an incoming incarcerated individual leaving one facility and now entering into the Marcy Correctional Facility. Nick went and responded to that call, which was Nick's obligation. That's his job. That's his duty. He followed. Nick did not know who this in-drafting, incoming incarcerated individual was. He has never seen this individual prior. He has never supervised and or worked with this individual. As Nick was going up to the administration building to meet this incoming and drafting incarcerated individual, he was met by two of his coworkers. Mr. Fitzpatrick gave you some names. You heard Mr. Kessler, you heard Mr. Angelo. They also met the Mohawk correction officer who did the transportation of the incarcerated individual from Mohawk over to the Marcy facility. 4 COs are there at this time. The 4 COs then walk out to the van where the incarcerated individual was. The 4 COs were able to get this incarcerated individual out of the van. We now know that this individual's name is Mr. Robert Brooks. They brought him in to the Marcy administration building. Per policy, the receiving correctional facility must ID this particular in-drafting incarcerated individual. He was then brought into an area of the administration room which we call the breezeway. You're going to hear testimony, I believe you're going to see some diagrams of the administration building. And this is a small room, not a very big room, right before you would exit the administration building and go into the actual compound. You go through what's called a man trap. In this breezeway, Mr. Brooks was unshackled by the Mohawk correctional officer. He took his mechanical restraints from him. Mr. Brooks is now unrestrained. In this small room, there was a use of force incident that did in fact transpire. Started by another correctional officer, not Nicholas Kiefer. Nicholas Kiefer, not knowing what just transpired, going back to his training, he immediately went to the assistance of his fellow employee. This breezeway incident, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear from a gentleman, Mr. Kessler. He said this whole incident lasted maybe 7 seconds. After this incident, Mr. Brooks, under his own power, albeit being escorted by 2 other COs, walked out of the breezeway onto this walkway, headed towards the infirmary. Mr. Brooks became non-compliant on this walkway. As you've heard, simple orders that may mean nothing to us carry big significance in the prison setting. He became non-compliant. He was put down to the ground. Nicholas Kiefer then went and applied the minimum amount of pepper spray to gain compliance. Now, there's going to be a question, and we're certainly going to have questions for the medical examiner, whether or not this minimum application of pepper spray even had an effect on Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks was then handcuffed, not by Mr. Kiefer, he was then handcuffed, and then he was escorted to the infirmary. Nicholas Kiefer did not touch Mr. Brooks for the remainder of this night. Let me say that again. Mr. Kiefer did not touch Mr. Brooks for the remainder of this evening. Mr. Brooks was in fact escorted to the treatment room. Now, Nicholas Kiefer did enter the treatment room on a few brief occasions. You're going to see this in the video. But on the few occasions, for the mere seconds that Mr. Kiefer was in that treatment room, there was no excessive force being applied to Mr. Brooks. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear testimony from one of the prosecution witnesses about how Nick Kiefer was ordered out of the treatment room. Now, the prosecution is attempting to tie Nicholas Kiefer to the actions of others, suggesting to you that he is somehow responsible via association. Ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard, the law requires more than that. It requires intent, it requires knowledge, it requires direct participation. We will show that Nick Kiefer did not possess this requisite intent. He did not have the knowledge, and he did not aid or abet anybody. Nick did not act with malice. Nick is not guilty of depraved indifference murder. Nick did not intend to cause any serious injury that resulted in death, and he's not guilty of manslaughter in the first degree. Nick is not guilty of gang assault because he did not cause a serious injury. Nick is not guilty of these crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, we urge you to listen very, very carefully. Consider the evidence that you, pursuant to your oath, that you deem is pertinent when deciding this matter for Mr. Kiefer. Remember, every person is entitled to a fair trial, and we believe you, the jury, will be able to do that and provide Nicholas Kiefer his fair trial. At the end of this case, ladies and gentlemen, we are confident that you will find that the evidence that the people will produce does not meet beyond a reasonable doubt burden. It will not support the charges that Nicholas has been charged with, and that you will return a verdict of not guilty. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Longo.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Luger?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, folks. Mr. Fitzpatrick is very impassioned, but you haven't heard a witness yet. You haven't seen a video, haven't seen anything. But you were promised a lot, a lot. And when the time comes, let's see what that adds up to as relates to one of the three people in the three trials that are going on, Matthew Gallagher. Whenever Matthew Gallagher's name is used, it's always associated with they, because Matthew Gallagher didn't harm Robert Brooks. He didn't hit him, he didn't strike him, he didn't encourage others to strike him, he didn't deny him medical care, he didn't do anything that contributed to the death of Robert Brooks. Nothing. And I'm going to be specific, and I ask you your patience because I'm going to go through the facts as you're going to hear them unfold. As you would expect, Matthew Gallagher has lived in this community. He's a husband and father. We'll get right past that. And we also know that Robert Brooks, whoever he was, doesn't deserve to be assaulted in prison. We all agree with that. But on December 9th, 2024, Matthew Gallagher was assigned as a CO to work something called rounds. He had 3 direct supervisors, 3 sergeants, Sergeant Trombley, Sergeant Mashaw, and Sergeant Plas. He had 2 supervising lieutenants. These were his bosses. That's who gave the CO's orders that day. They gave out the orders. Now, none of them ordered anyone to beat Mr. Brooks, all right? We're not going to say they ordered any of that. But they were in charge. They controlled everything that night. Chain of command. Any of you had served in the military, chain of command. A call came across the radio at Marcy that an inmate was being brought from the Mohawk Correctional Facility to Marcy. It's a nearby state prison. At the time, Matt Gallagher was in an area of Marcy called the Infirmary Building. That's where he was. He was in an open area with 3 other officers, with other officers coming in and out. It's a quiet night. And on the TV is a Tom Cruise movie being played. A couple of the officers are watching it. The Mohawk prison, their transport officers were bringing Robert Brooks over to Marcy. He'd been involved in fights, you've heard that, over several days. He'd been struck in the head by an inmate with a padlock, swung and hit him. He had blood on his face, blood on his nose, cut to his eye, bruises all over his head. You may see pictures of those bruises. He had suffered a head injury and he was talking gibberish at times, gibberish. He thought he was going on an airplane flight that night. That's what he thought, where he thought he was going. But when the call came from Mohawk to Marcy that an inmate was coming over, Mr. Brooks, but that wasn't known, Matt Gallagher knew nothing. He didn't know Robert Brooks. He didn't know he had been injured. He didn't know why he was coming over, and he didn't know the crimes that he had committed that got him into Mohawk to begin with, that Mr. Fitzpatrick described. He was stabbing his girlfriend. All he knew was that there was an inmate coming from Mohawk to Marcy with some type of a problem. That's why they do transfers. Now, Matt was assigned to the transport van that night. He would get into a van, he would drive around the grounds, he would check the buildings. That was part of his responsibilities. When the call came, the first thing he did was he went to the nurse's office in the infirmary building. Got out of his van, or from where he was in the lobby area, he went into the nurse's office, spoke to the nurses. He then quickly went outside to the transport van assigned to him. He was assigned a transport van. He got in, he started the van. And by the way, every second of December 9th, you can see Matt Gallagher on somebody's camera. Every second. You'll never lose sight of him. You will know exactly what he did that night. He got in his van, he started up his van, and he drove the van a short distance towards where the new inmate was going to be coming in. It was an area of the prison where the inmate would be coming in. And that was Mr. Brooks, but Mr. Gallagher didn't know that. His body camera, Matt Gallagher's body camera, shows that a second van was already at the location to pick up Mr. Brooks. It was driven by a CO, a correction officer named Farina, Officer Farina. It was parked there. So Matt parks his van behind Farina's van, and he gets out and he starts walking up to where he expects the inmate to be coming from. Farina's van blocks Matt's view. He can't see. It's right in front of him. And it's nighttime, by the way. It's dark, and there's a long sidewalk up to where the inmate's going to be coming from. The side door of Farina's van is partially open, which tells Matt Gallagher that the plan is that the inmate's going to go in Farina's van and be transported someplace. So Matt, usually there'd be 1 or 2 people collecting an inmate who comes in on a transfer. And there's usually a sergeant, a boss, who's assigned up at the time of inmate being received. And Matt stands at Farina's van because he sees the 2 officers coming towards him with an inmate, which is Mr. Brooks. He sees it. He stands at Farina's van, the door's open, and he stands there because he expects the inmate's going to come and going to be placed in Officer Farina's van. So he stands there. He doesn't move. But the officers pass right by him. They go, you'll see the video, go right by him. Nobody says a word to Matt Gallagher. They have Mr. Brooks in custody. They're bringing him along. Another officer follows, and then 2 more officers. So 5 officers had been up with Mr. Brooks in the intake area. And they all ignore Matt Gallagher. They all ignore him. He's just standing there. He then, when they go by him, there's nothing untoward at that point. Matt Gallagher goes, leaves Farina's van, and he goes back to his van. And he gets into his van and he reparks his van. And then he gets out and begins following the other officers towards the infirmary. And you'll see his body cams. He can't see the officers. They're in the building already, but he follows their path. His body cam will show that all Matt knew at that time was there was an unknown inmate, had come through intake, had been transported, and was heading down towards the infirmary. That's all he knew. None of the officers seemed agitated, and none of them requested Matt Gallagher's assistance. None of them. But what we do know from accounts, or at least I expect we'll hear some testimony, is that not only had Mr. Brooks at another correctional facility, but he had been involved in an interaction which will be described to you in the intake area. Now, Matt Gallagher didn't know that, didn't see it, didn't see any evidence that anything had happened. So Matt Gallagher goes down the hallway. The nurse's office is on the left. It's called an emergency room. It's called a lot of things, but it's the same as a medical office. You go in the office, there's a gurney, there's medicines in the cabinets, there's counters along the sides, and then there's an area, because this is where inmates' pictures are taken. When they come in, the pictures are taken there. There's a mat where they stand, there's a white backdrop that they stand against, and photographs are taken of them at the time that they come. It's used for that as well. Matt doesn't go in the room. He doesn't need to go in the room. There's 4 or 5 officers in the room. There's 2 sergeants, 2 bosses in the room, 2. And they're all in, he doesn't know what they're doing. He's down the hallway, and he's really doing nothing. He's just standing there doing nothing. He's chit-chatting with a couple officers, because there's officers in the hallway as well. And he stands there for a period of time. He wasn't needed. There was no need to have Matt Gallagher at that point in time. There were normal reasons that Mr. Brooks would have been brought into that room. Typical reasons, not because he'd been assaulted, but there's a lot of reasons that an inmate's brought there to document prior injuries from a prior facility, so the new facility doesn't get blamed, to conduct a medical exam, because a medical exam is required when an inmate arrives. There's a lot of reasons he would be there. Nothing that would get Matt Gallagher thinking this is a problem. But while he's there, something's said in the room, in the nurse's room, the ER room, that drew his attention. So he walks down and he looks around the corner, and what does he see? He sees and what one of the officers says they hear is, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." When Matt Gallagher turns the corner to look into that room, this is his vision. This is what he sees. In the corner is his boss, Sergeant Trombley. He's standing at a counter. He's got a piece of paper that he's writing on. To his right is his other boss, Sergeant Mashaw, who's standing there with his jacket on, his baseball cap on, and his hands in his pocket. And over at the gurney is Mr. Brooks on the edge of the gurney with officers Anzalone, Farina, and 1 or 2 other officers present. And Matt Gallagher is looking around the corner and he's watching. He has no involvement. And you'll see Officer Farina starts wiping Mr. Brooks' face. That's how it appears from the vantage point of Mr. Gallagher. He's got a white rag of some kind, or white Kleenex, and he's wiping his face. Could be any reason he's doing that. Could be blood, could be mucus, could be leftover OC spray if he was sprayed. It could be anything, or it could be he's trying to clear his mouth to look into his mouth for something being smuggled in. What happens at that moment is, it appears Mr. Brooks bites down on Officer Farina's finger. That's what it appears. And Officer Farina reacts ridiculously. He loses it. He pulls his hand away, and he punches in the face Mr. 3 times. And Officer Anzalone starts punching Mr. Brooks in the leg. It lasts 4 seconds, 3 to 4 seconds. That's how long it lasts. Mr. Gallagher's still back. The sergeants who are in charge are standing there, and none of them move. But then it stops. It stops. And you'll see then the officers then, and they're acting roughly. No question they're acting roughly. They start trying to pull Mr. Brooks from the edge of the gurney onto the gurney. This is a medical gurney. This is where he's supposed to be, on a medical gurney. And they try to pull him up. They try 4 times. They're getting rougher each time. Matt Gallagher's sergeant is in front of them. Another sergeant's there, and they don't move. They don't do a thing. Matt takes a step forward, like, what am I going to do? Should I do something? Takes a step back, and then he goes past his sergeant. He goes up to Mr. Brooks. He doesn't grab him by the neck. He doesn't grab him by the skin. He takes his shirt and he moves him up on the gurney. That's what he does. He moves him up on the gurney. And just as he finishes doing that, Officer Farina kicks Mr. Brooks between the legs. It appears he's either trying to hurt him or he's trying to push his body up further on the gurney. Whatever he does, it's wrong. Mr. Gallagher now just has the shirt. He's not touching any other part of Mr. Brooks. He lets go, and then an officer comes around in front of him and blocks him out. His sergeant's behind him, and Mr. Brooks' legs are kicking. They're kicking. He can't kick people. And someone says shackles or irons. What that means is when inmates are transferred, when inmates are kicking, when they're acting inappropriately in some way from the waist down, you get shackles. They're handcuffs for the ankles. They're not excessive force. They're not wrong. They're part of somebody's job. The only one who has shackles is Matt Gallagher. Matt Gallagher has shackles out in his van. So Matt Gallagher leaves. He leaves the room. Sergeants are in charge. He leaves the room, goes right down the hallway, goes out the front door, goes in his van, gets the leg irons, comes back down the hallway, comes back into the room. And you can see from other people's cameras that remain in the room that they're holding Mr. Brooks' legs tight as if he is trying to kick. But while Mr. Gallagher's gone, you also see this from the other people's cameras. Farina loses it again, starts punching him again, as does Anzalone. They both start punching him again, but Matt Gallagher doesn't even know this. He has no idea that this is going on because he's down a hallway, out the front door, coming back. He walks in. They're not doing it anymore, so he has no idea they even did it. He walks up, puts the shackles around one foot that's kicking, and struggles with the other foot, and either he or another officer puts shackles on the other foot. And that's what he does. That act of shackling his legs, and you heard it, is being alleged as a basis for a murder charge against Matthew Gallagher, a manslaughter charge against Matthew Gallagher, putting shackles on the ankles of an inmate kicking. Job number 1 of a correction officer is to restrain an inmate who's kicking, not to have him hooked up so he can be beaten, because Matt Gallagher doesn't know he's going to be beaten, to do his job. And Matt Gallagher backs up. The inmate, Mr. Brooks, out of respect, Mr. Brooks, then is brought over from the, Mr. Brooks is there for a period of time. He's leaned forward. Mr. Gallagher goes back to over by the door, stands by the door again, because it's not his situation. There's nothing for him to do. There's nothing for him to intervene in. He's doing his job. He's standing by the door. And Officer Farina, who was bit, remember I said he was supposedly bit, is, you see on camera, he starts shaking his hand and he says something. And Officer Anzalone, he must hear him say something like, God, he bit me or something. He decides to punch one more time. He punches Mr. Brooks. Nobody could stop that. Nobody could know it was coming. It happened. The sergeant, the camera that records that act is the sergeant's. The sergeant is standing from me to you, away from the gurney, and he didn't have an opportunity to do anything. Or if he did, if he heard it coming, he didn't do anything. But either way, there was no opportunity to stop it. It was Farina losing it, Anzalone losing it. So what is then Mr. Brooks is taken over to the wall where the pictures are typically taken. Somebody says the word camera, goes over to the wall. Mr. Gallagher stays in the room. They take him over by the wall. They put him in front of the white. The two officers that take him over are blocking the view of Mr. Brooks. It's unclear what they're trying to do. Whether they're trying to raise him up, take pictures, search him. It's unclear what they're trying to do. He's over there for a better part of a minute and a half. And then an officer comes over and unhooks the shackles. Mr. Brooks is brought back to the gurney. He's put back on the gurney. He's brought back roughly. No question, he's brought back roughly. He's placed on the gurney, and his pants are now being taken off because they're looking at his what he had on him, presumably. His pants are pulled off at that point in time, and then the officer, it's realized that he's hurt, that he's injured, and the officers start looking. After a period of time, the nurses come into the room, 2 male nurses, and you'll see the nurses, it's being alleged that Mr. Gallagher is depraved because he didn't intervene at some point in time. Intervention really that is fictional as a concept. But the nurses come into the room, you'll see video of them for over 9 minutes, walking around doing nothing. They just walk around. They go up to him. He's got a pulse, he's got a heartbeat. They don't do anything for about 9 minutes before they do anything. Matt Gallagher's not in charge of the medical at that point in time. He's in the room, but he's not in charge of the medical. Matt Gallagher is charged with murder and manslaughter for not providing medical care. The nurses didn't provide the medical care. They were in the room. They didn't provide any medical care for a period of time. There's 3 things that are alleged to be the actions of Mr. Gallagher that results in a murder charge, a manslaughter charge, and a gang assault charge. The first is putting shackles on, murder. That's what they say. The second is moving Mr. Brooks up onto the gurney, murder. They say that's a murder, an accomplice to murder. And the third is not getting medical care when the nurses, when medical care came, when medical care was there, didn't do anything. They didn't think the situation required them to do anything. Yet they're charging Matthew Gallagher with murder and manslaughter. The government, I gave you a lot. I gave you a lot of facts, and I'm trying to be fact specific because as you recall, there's 3 trials. The fact trial, I'm trying to address the fact trial. I'm not trying to talk pie in the sky kind of things and get all emotional and try to convince you of anything other than say, these are the facts that are going to come. These are what you're going to see. And I gave you a lot. I don't expect you to remember it. And I think the other lawyers said they don't expect you to remember. It's too much information coming at once. But I do expect that I've given you a sense of how to look at the proof through the lens of what Matthew Gallagher knew and how Matthew Gallagher acted based upon what he knew. You will be judging his actions specifically, where he was when the assaults by the officers occurred, and how he did the best he thought he could do under moving situations, a situation he didn't create, a situation he came upon that others were involved in. And at the end, I'll ask you to find Matthew Gallagher not guilty on all the charges, despite how mistreated Mr. Brooks was, despite that. Because Mr. Gallagher is not responsible for Mr. Brooks' death. And I don't say that in the sense of, close my eyes, close my ears. He did the best that he could under the circumstances in front of him. And I'm going to ask you to find him not guilty, but I'm going to ask you to find him not guilty and feel good about it and feel good that you did the right thing because you listened to the evidence. You paid attention to the evidence, not the histrionics, but the evidence that you're going to see through Matt Gallagher's eyes as every second that he was in that facility is on a tape recording. And I'll ask you to return a not guilty verdict at the end of the trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bluegrand. And ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening attentively for about over an hour now today.
If you found value in this video, please like the video, comment below. Don't forget to share the video. And if you feel that I've earned it, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is to give you honest and direct feedback and go deeper than what the mainstream media is telling you. Take care, God bless, and see you next time.